thank you today for your love. Thank you, oh God, for another opportunity that we may stand and learn of your word. And I Lord, I ask you to bless us. Give us what we might learn and we might deduce and might pull out of our word that we may please you. These things we do, pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, in winding this down, well, I keep saying it's going to wind down. I was telling something else. Because in looking at prayer/conversation, there's always more to be looked at. What I was thinking about this week and what kind of came to me, and this is what I want to talk about this week, is the specificity of prayer or conversation. In other words, being specific about what we're asking for. And it was funny, I was talking to Elder Sister Love, and let's continue to keep them in our conversation to God on their behalf. Because Elder Love, Eric had surgery and just kind of going through some things with that. But I was talking with her as I was meditating in the car and got her, and just telling her about this whole thing of being focused in conversation. And this is what I wrote. How do I focus my conversation in prayer when there's so much to talk about? Because, and even if you look at the model prayer, Jesus kind of gave an outline. And the reason why I put this down is because sometimes I think we get into a mode of rambling. And whereas it really should be focused, specific, you don't come and just dump a whole year's worth of conversation on either your spouse or somebody in 10 minutes. I mean, if you do, it's just gonna, or have you ever heard this commercial that they have where talking about the speed of the internet, and it talks about, okay, DJ hit them with 20 songs in 1 second. And it's like, and you can't hear nothing. Same thing if the prayer/conversation is not focused, it just becomes a bunch of, I won't say nonsense, but things that just don't make sense. It's hard to keep up with things if there's no natural flow to the conversation. And I had put this, I know it's in here, oh yeah, it's right here. This is why when you have a meeting, you prepare an agenda. You want to keep things on task. So the question is, do you have an agenda when you talk with God? Or does it consist of, let's see, do you have an agenda when you, okay, yeah, anyway, whatever I was putting there. So so the thing about, so we should think about, before you go to God, is what is my agenda? What do I want to talk to him about? What is my conversation going to be? Can you imagine, and I'm sure in the beginning, it was probably funny because until you get used to somebody, it was like, I remember the first time I had to run a meeting on this new job. I was extremely nervous. I didn't say a lot. There's other stuff I thought about that I could have said later. And it was like, okay, if I had really, done an agenda. And when you do an agenda, and you the manager know this, you look at the agenda, then you make sure that the agenda makes sense. Then you start putting things to the agenda. And that's just like when you minister. You look at, again, certainly it comes straight from God, but there's kind of an outline, if you will, of how things should flow. Otherwise, it becomes, as Paul said, sounding brass and tinkling cymbal. It really does not make a lot of sense because it's just all this nonsense, if you will. Oh, bless you, Deacon and Mother. I'll start right now, just getting into this. But today, what we're talking about is making sure that our prayers are specific and focused. Because otherwise, like I said, it just becomes nonsense or rambling. And, again, even if you think about this, when you're having a conversation at home, you're just not kind of all over the place, especially if, okay, say for instance, we need to buy a car. So you're going to start having a conversation about, okay, what do we need to do in order to get the car, financing, blah, blah, blah. Because this conversation now is going to be very focused on, okay, this is what we need to do. talk about today. Or sometime when I'm sure with you guys, you went to Sedona, so y'all were in the car for 2 hours. I'm sure it wasn't total silence, so y'all were probably talking about things that you don't get a chance to talk about in the normal course of time, because even in that, even though y'all drive to work together, when you're going to work, it's like your mind is focused on something else. When you have nothing else on your mind and you're really able to focus in on what is it that I really need to cover today, or what do I need to talk about? And I always go back to Enoch. Enoch, I'm sure in the beginning, it was probably some nervousness of, here's God, what do I talk to him about? It was funny, I remember, there was an episode, y'all know I'm a Star Trek buff. There was an episode of Star Trek to where Wesley had to take this trip with Jean-Luc Picard, the captain. He's like, what am I going to talk to him about all this time? Because he's the captain and, I'm just an ensign. Well, of course, by sitting there, then, you just kind of create a natural flow. The thing that Jesus is trying to get us to look at in the model prayer is, what should the natural flow be of our conversation, as opposed to just kind of all over the place and telling God everything. So again, create an agenda. What do I want to talk to the Lord about today? What should I focus in on? And here's the thing about it. God already knows everything that you need anyway. But it's like, but what is my focus going to be today to speak with him about? Speak and then listen. Speak and then listen. If you're talking all the time, when does God have a chance to speak? So again, if it's just all going to be totally about me, Lord, I need blah, 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 and Jesus, remember this, and Lord, my job, and yada, yada. I said this one time before, one of the worst things you can have is dead silence in a conversation, because it leaves an awkward moment. But again, Psalms 46:8, be still and know that I am God. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silent before him. So if God is not saying anything, be quiet and listen. Right. Because here's the thing about it. You guys will be married 40 years in January, right? Amen. You find that sometimes it's better not to say anything.
Ain't that the truth? Amen.
Because I learned this from marriage too. If you speak what's on your mind, God knows your heart, he knows your mind, but some things ought not to be uttered. Isn't it funny? Paul said this, and John said it. He said that there were certain things that, because again, I talked about this Sunday I think it was in the passage of scripture on Sunday, where Paul talks about himself, and he says, I knew a man that, ascended into the third heaven. And he said, there were things that were said to me that I cannot utter. John says that he heard, it was a thunder that came from heaven. And he was getting ready to write. He said, shut up the book and don't write it. There are certain things in conversation, through the silence, or even in conversations, there are things that the Lord will say to you that is not for anybody else to hear. The reason why marriages, and it's funny because I've got a marriage to do this afternoon, and I was kind of, thinking over some various things with that, and I've counseled, with this couple anyway. But there are things in staying together 40 years, the reason how you do that is because A, there's certain things you don't say. B, it's things that are said in the house that you don't say to nobody else. There are certain things. I remember the Lord showed me something one time, and he said, I didn't tell you or show you that for public knowledge. I just did it so you know. And then I held it to myself. It was funny, I was telling this one couple, because the couple that I'm marrying today is somebody that my wife knows well. But because, you know, how they wanted to do it, and they wanted to do it on the low, and again, you know, everybody, hey, it's, you know, you do what you do. And my wife knew I was counseling with him. She didn't even know when the wedding was. And I asked the guy, because, you know, this was somebody that, you know, she used to watch when they were baby. I said, well, it's like, well, did you tell Auntie Ivis? I said, I ain't say nothing. I said, if you hadn't said, she wouldn't have known. I would have done it, and it would have been done. There are things that people say to me as a minister, I'll take to my grave. Because it ain't for public knowledge. To me, you know, as the clergy, if people can't confide in me in what they say, and know that if you tell me something in confidence, then it comes out on Sunday morning's message.
All right.
Then you'll never tell me anything.
Yes,
So I mean, so likewise with God in conversation, sometimes it's silent. So understand what I'm saying, you know, in terms of like the focus of why certain things are, or why God will say certain things to you and nobody else will know. That's what's so crazy about stuff. God will say things to you that are so profound, things like, wasn't for nobody else. But yet it is for his glory, and it will nourish you. In nature, conversation, let's see. Oh, no, I'm sorry. In a natural conversation, you have a point that you need to get across. You stop listening to what the person's saying because you're waiting for a chance to jump in so you can get your point across. So they just going on. They can go on for 5 minutes and you ain't hearing nothing because you heard one thing and said, and I'm gonna jump in on that. Yeah. And it's like, okay, you finished, now I'm gonna talk. We could miss a critical part of the conversation because we're not listening. This is called active listening. And it's funny, I said this with this one lady kind of, well, this came out in conversation. What I was doing in the beginning, because they asked me to take meeting notes and what have you, well, you got all this lingo that's flying around, you got people using the acronyms and abbreviations, and I'm like, I don't know what y'all talking about. So what I did was, I had an iPhone, you know, they gave me an iPhone, so, you know, I got put the record button on it, so I would record the meeting. Then I would take the meeting back, and then I would go and transcribe the meeting. So what happened, one day this lady, I want you to take notes and blah, blah. Because, you know, see, I'm getting better now. I mean, I can almost know in things that are being said, because there's one guy, and they were really freaking me out, because the first time they had me doing this online. So everybody's looking at what you write down in terms of, you know, the minutes. I'm like, okay, I don't like that. So I got, you know, a pad of paper. I'm like, okay, I can't do that real time. Because I don't understand half of what y'all talking about. Oh, here's another point. It will sound like rambling if you don't understand the context. So to me, all I could do was record it and go back and just script it. I still didn't understand the content of it. In the beginning, if God is speaking to you and you have no reference of what he's talking about because we are carnal minded, you're not going to get what God is saying. It's funny, I listened to Mother Palmer, and you know, she says something, and she constantly says it each week, and I don't know if people really get what she's saying. She said, I love the Old Testament because of being able to draw the analogies out of old to new. Before. The Bible's always been there.
Amen.
You 50 plus, I ain't
Yes.
gonna give your age.
Right.
We've been saying, I know, amen, Mother, bless you. Amen. But you've been in church probably 40 years or more. Just because you were there didn't mean you understood the context of what was being said. So it's not until you grasp, it's like now, because it was funny, Monday I had to go back to Hoffman because they were doing a training class, and the senior manager there said to me, she said, well, Ron, Probably what they're gonna go over, because they brought in this new class of people, if you will, because, it's just like kind of all hands on deck. They got salespeople and everybody that are, really trying to go out and gather information, mediate, they call it customer, know who your client is and make sure the paperwork's in order. Well, for me, it's like I had like an edge knowledge. I understood at a 50,000 foot view of what was trying to be accomplished. And it was funny because I even went in there and bragged and said, oh yeah, I managed this process before. Granted, this was like in the 80s. Well, when 9/11 happened, this whole process took a whole nother turn. So what I knew before, the context of it changed. Mm-hmm. What we knew of God in 2000 is different from what we know now in 2017. Yeah. It's because we had this, I'm trying to think, I was going to use a scripture that said that they have a form of godliness but denying the power thereof. Now, it's not that one. Oh, forever learning, never coming into the knowledge of the truth. You have an idea of what truth is. Do you think when Jesus asked Pilate what is truth, that he didn't know the definition of truth? That was not the point. What he was trying to get over to him, it's like, okay, in context of all this, I already said I am the way, the truth, and the life. So when I ask you what is truth, truth is standing in front of you and you don't even know it. So it wasn't that, again, he wasn't insulting his intelligence. But I think, again, when you think of your conversation that you had with God 10 years ago, based on where it's at now, think about it. And we can admit to tell the truth and shame the devil. Our prayers were very selfish. They were very self-centered. They were very self-focused on what's me, here's what's going on around me, blah, blah, blah. But when you get a full context of thy will be done, it's funny, I've seen people put it out on Facebook, and sometimes I want to say, but do you really understand? Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Ironically, I was thinking to myself, because just with this election cycle and just the craziness around 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and I was, and even it's crazy because there's certain things that are just coming up, popping up. Paula White, who people had respected as a minister. As a matter of fact, Paula White, out of there, Dietrich Hatton was her minister of music. And, Church Without Walls in Florida, something. So, you look at that, and somebody had a rant that she had on Facebook, and it was with Roland Martin that was kind of, speaking to that. And she's just going off on this rant of, well, basically, with Donald Trump being in the White House, that this is God speaking, and anybody speaking against him is speaking against God. And I'm like, my head almost spun around. And what's so crazy, and she believes that. The Bible-thumping Christian belt of those that support would believe that. And they stand on that, and they justify it. And I said to the Lord, you know what, Lord? I said, where did we miss the boat on, again, whether it been Hillary or whomever? And the Lord said, because your prayers were focused on someplace else. As a matter of fact, y'all didn't even pray. You just assumed what was going to happen. But yet, God still has his way in everything that happens. Maybe you didn't ask. We did not ask for 45. And now the people, you even have the other party that's saying this man is not fit to serve, and it's scary because he has the nuclear codes. So even then, and I'm like, Lord, why would you allow it? All things that happen, this is where you learn thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. things that you pray. Have you ever prayed for something that did not happen?
Yeah.
And you wondered, and you were really puzzled as to, I don't understand. You know, what was, think about this. And here's my default. Two incidents. One I'll get a little way from home, then I get close to home. Bishop Turner. His church prayed. Prayed, would not release the body. God is going to raise him up because we believe.
Right.
The Bible tells us that we have that kind of power. So it really, whether anybody wants to say this or not, because people don't want to call God to task. Because again, if you call him, he may tell you. And I'm sure it's like, I remember when Elder McGee passed, Sister Belinda McGee, she would not release the body. I mean, I don't know if it was a day or so, but it's like, no, the Lord's gonna raise him up. We got power. And we even point back to, this is what the Lord did. He raised Peter and them, God is able to raise people from the dead. So you would ask, why not them? Y'all son Booney, it's like, wasn't doing anything wrong in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's like, Lord, really, what is going on? Why won't you bring my son back? That's because every outcome of conversation is to God's glory. You don't have to like it, but the focus is always going to be, how am I glorified out of this?
Yeah.
And here's what's crazy. You may never see why God was glorified in the situation. Your nephew, Romel, his mother, and you know what, and I've never, bless you here, I've never experienced the loss of a child. And God knows, I can't even fathom the thought of that. But if God allows it, he's allowing that for a reason, regardless of our conversation. Because our conversation is, Lord, you need to do this. Hello, Jesus careth thou not if we perish. And it's like, but hey, it's about my glory. And when you think about conversations, because this is something that, now I'm just going totally off script, I don't even know why I'm at here. Because I was thinking about this in the car when I was coming. You've got Jonah, whom the Lord allows to be swallowed up by the big fish. Jonah has this conversation, so says in the book of Jonah, out of the belly of hell. So in other words, hell or Hades was the place for the dead. So one could almost deduce from that Jonah, and I'm not saying, I can't explain it. I'm just saying what the scripture said. Obviously, if you're in digestive juices, it is going to consume you. The Bible says he's calling out of the belly of hell. And yet, 3 days, the Lord allows him to stay there. 3 days and 3 nights. He answers his prayer only because it's going to point to his glory.
Yes, sir.
For he says in the New Testament, you seek after sign, but the only sign that's given is Jonah. He was in the heart of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. So shall the Son of Man be. So again, he allowed. So Jonah, under normal circumstances, should have been consumed. You were disobedient to what the Lord said, and he even said, okay, throw me overboard. Okay, well then, your justification should be, you should be swallowed up, consumed, because you were allowing Nineveh to run amok because of your arrogance. Even when looking at Nineveh, and the Lord even allowing Jonah to run amok, is because Jesus then pointed to and said that the people of Nineveh are going to rise up.
Yes, sir.
And they're going to judge because they heard the preaching of Jonah.
Mm-hmm.
So again, so you look at the sequence of events. If Jonah had not been rebellious and, had not, and said, okay, fine, I'm going to catch a boat and, then throw me overboard, blah, blah, blah. Out of that, the Lord heard his prayer, not to save him. It had nothing to do with
Yes,
Jonah.
sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like, but I'm doing it because I need to do this as a mark, a line in the sand. So remember, so as God does things, he just does not frivolously just do it. Okay, because you asked me, well, yeah, okay, I'm God, I can get you up. It is more to the story than that. Even when you look at Bishop Turner, and the craziness behind that, because the Bible even speaks to that. I look at Bishop Turner and just kind of the turn of events with that, and I'm like, well, he was calling for me. I didn't know, we had kind of become estranged. But even when I look at all that, it was something he had prophesied back when I was a child. I came and hit him with it, then he put me out, then he got sick, never got a chance to talk with him. That's because it was not God's will.
Yes, sir.
Put this on camera. It was not God's will for me to pastor Faith Tabernacle. In my mind, for years, I questioned that. I'm like, Lord, you got everybody else's sons who, you look at Byron and even look at Bishop E, they done pass this off to their sons. And I'm like, Lord, I did everything right. Why didn't, and here, this was out of the belly of my hell. Because I struggled with even trying to keep a building open.
Yes, sir.
I'm like, Lord, here's a building that's open. This was my father's heritage. And it was funny because one of my best friends even said to me, he said, well, I realize, your stepdad's church is in disrepair. He said, but there's a buddy of mine that's an electrician. They built a house. So he said, so I'll call all on my buddies and we'll fix up the church.
All right.
And I'm like, so what was going on? I could have fixed it up and, we could have went on and, because then you have visions of grandeur, of the glory days. Oh, we're going to bring everybody back together. It was not what God ordered. But it's crazy because you can't see what God ordered until you look down the road much later.
Yes, sir.
Jonah and them did not even, when you look at the people in the scripture, they have, we have hindsight. They were in the middle of it and still don't know. Like I said, Jonah still wasn't told what was going on with him.
Right.
But yet we, with hindsight, it ministered to us as to what he was going through. So the glory of God came out of that story.
Yeah.
So we look at things, because like I look at Bishop Turner and it's crazy because it almost looks like, wow, so the man passed and it looks like his work is just going down the toilet. But what God had to do, because I thought about Tiffany and Andre, yes, so here they move away. God has to do things in order to save some. God, hear what I said, he has to do things to save some. Everybody is not going to be saved, but he does it to save some. Paul said to the Greeks, I became as them in the various ones so that I might save some. God so loved the world that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but whosoever should not, but they could. Because they're not going, he said, if you don't believe that I am he, you shall die in your sins.
Yeah.
So again, so he gives the leeway, he kind of gives, okay, so here's really the focus point. Jesus with Mary and Martha. It's funny because I was in the car, and we kind of read the story sanitized. But if you really look at the feelings that were going on in the midst of all this, they're like, okay, Jesus, we call for you. Here was the thing about Jesus. Jesus, whenever he got tired, he could always go and chill at Mary and Martha's house. Mary and Martha, well, really Lazarus' house, with Mary and Martha being there. So it's like, okay, our brother's sick unto death. We called you. You ain't even bothered to come. It's like, really? We have to go back when the multitudes are all on you. Like, come on, Jesus, here's a place of haven for you to rest. Lord, I asked you for one thing, and that was come and heal our brother. And you were too trifling to come and even do that. That's really you wanted the real version of it. I know the scripture didn't say it like that, but that's the real version. Like, really, Jesus? And you can admit to this or not if you want to. You cannot tell me because I have done it. I'm like, Lord, I'm serving you. And it's like, really? You would allow this to happen to me after all I done done for you? I done gave my life. I done sacrificed everything. And it's like, Lord, and really? This is how you treat those who you love? Y'all may not have ever had that conversation, but I sure have.
Amen.
Because you don't understand. Because again, like I said, if you don't understand the acronyms, the abbreviations, it's so funny because when I first walked in the door, I keep notes. I was looking at my notepad and I was laughing. Now, I'm like, they probably had to think I was the biggest idiot because, you know, you go back and look at the acronyms and people just fly the stuff around. And now that I'm acclimated to the acronyms, I understand what they're talking about. Oh yeah, ECM and AIMS and FCRM and, you know, and before, I mean, you sitting there like, what? And here's what's so crazy. I miss critical stuff because I got stuck on an acronym. What does that mean? People get stuck, I think, sometime in the message or God's messaging because he'll say something that you don't get and you'll just dwell on that and the rest of the message is going on and you don't get it. And it was like, that was just like a slight blurb. You really didn't, that wasn't even important. That was not even the contents of what was going on. It was like, that was just a piece of it, and you just honed in thinking, that's it. And that's not it. And what he said afterwards, you missed. So, and here's what's crazy, this, in thinking through this whole Jesus and Lazarus and Mary and Martha thing. They said, Lord, if you had been here, our brother would not have died. And then I'm thinking to myself, okay, you got Peter and the rest of them that are there with Jesus. And 4 days prior, or even maybe longer than that, because it said he was 4 days dead because he's stinking. I'm sure they said before he died. So it probably had to be a couple of days. It may have been a week or so. And Jesus was like, oh, he all right. Then they're like, oh, he died. He's sleeping. I know it's not recorded, but you can't tell me Peter with his big mouth and say, yeah, Jesus didn't care because he told us not to worry about it. You know you got somebody, you know, walking around with you that's, you know, just, they can't hold water. So I'm sure, so now think about it. They're really pissed now. It's like, really? But, like I was telling Love this morning as I began to think about this and why God answers certain things. Because here's the thing about it. It was hundreds of thousands of people that walked around sick.